The Grand Justicar of the Xylos Collective, designated as speaker for the whole, adjusted its crystalline chimes, the soft, resonant tones echoing into the immense silence of the high chamber. The air itself seemed heavy, thick with unspoken anxieties that coiled like serpents in the shadows between the floating obsidian daises. Light from the captured star at the chamber's zenith cascaded downwards, illuminating the myriad forms of the assembled delegates. The chitinous carapaces of the Cathar, the gaseous, swirling consciousness of the Lumina, the stoic, silicon-based sentinels of the Ool. For cycles, this chamber had been a place of measured debate, of glacial but deliberate progress. Now it was a vessel of fear. The source of this fear was a single, newly ratified designation, a classification so rare it had not been invoked since the Great Unraveling. The words, projected in the cool, universal script above the speaker's dais, seemed to burn into the very fabric of reality. Human life has been officially elevated to a dangerous vessel. The term was not merely a warning, it was a philosophical and existential condemnation. A vessel was a species deemed to carry a concept so antithetical to the consortium's core tenets of stability, predictability, and cosmic harmony that its very existence posed a contagion risk to the fabric of civilization. To be declared dangerous, on top of that, was to be marked for containment, for isolation, and, if necessary, for sterile excision from the galactic community. The Lumina delegate, a shimmering cloud of incandescent particles, pulsed with agitated light, its form coalescing into a tighter, more focused point of simmering distress. The designation is premature, it emanated, its thoughts translating into the chamber's shared psychic space, a wave of anxious harmonics. The data is incomplete. We have observed their expansion, their chaotic technological leaps, their emotional broadcasts, but to label them a conceptual plague, the evidence is circumstantial. It is an act of profound aggression based on predictive models that are, by the Ool's own admission, riddled with uncertainty. From a darkened alcove, a deep, grinding sound preceded the Ool representative's response. The massive, stone-like being did not move, but its voice, a low seismic rumble, resonated through the floor. Certainty is a luxury the universe seldom affords. We do not act on certainty, we act on probability. And the probability curves surrounding humanity have breached every acceptable threshold of cosmic stability. Their patterns of growth are not merely expansionist. They are exponential in a way that defies established biological and sociological models. Their technology does not evolve. It erupts, spontaneously and without logical precursors. We have mapped their cognitive outputs, their art, their philosophies, their stories. They are saturated with a concept we have found no parallel for. A belief in the infinite potential of the individual will, a concept that fundamentally destabilizes the predictable, collective-driven nature of all other known sapient life. A sharp clatter of mandibles came from the Cathar Imperator, its multifaceted eyes fixed on the shimmering Lumina. The Ool speak truth. We have monitored their military simulations, their theoretical war games. They are not merely strategies. They are expressions of a terrifyingly fluid and adaptive paranoia. They conceive of threats that do not exist and then develop countermeasures for them, creating a perpetual cycle of escalating theoretical violence. Their minds are forges of improbable horrors, and now their reach extends beyond their native system. They have begun to touch the outer markers of settled space. What happens when such a volatile vessel comes into contact with a civilization that has known peace for millennia? The consortium's primary mandate is the preservation of harmony. This, humanity, is the very personification of discord. Speaker for the Whole allowed the tension to hang in the air, a palpable force. Its own thoughts were a cascade of precisely ordered logic, yet even they struggled to fully contain the disquieting anomaly that was Homo sapiens. The Xylos were beings of pure intellect, their forms intricate lattices of living crystal that processed reality as a series of complex equations. For eons, they had been the arbiters of reason within the consortium. Their counsel sought to temper the passions of the more volatile species. Yet humanity defied their equations. The species was a variable that refused to be solved, an outlier that broke every predictive model. The Xylos archives contained observations of humanity stretching back to their pre-industrial age, a time when they were considered a minor, self-destructive curiosity, destined to burn themselves out before ever reaching for the stars. The consortium had watched them through passive sensors, a grand, long-term anthropology. Study of a species deemed too chaotic to ever achieve interstellar travel. And then they had, not with the slow, cautious steps of other fledgling races, but in a sudden, explosive burst of progress that had left the consortium's observers reeling. One cycle, they were hurling chemically propelled rockets at their own moon. The next, they were manipulating spacetime in ways that even the UL, masters of gravitational engineering, found theoretically unsound yet demonstrably effective. Their technological advancements were not built upon a clear, linear path of discovery, but on what appeared to be intuitive, almost reckless leaps of imagination. It was this unpredictability, this utter refusal to conform to the established patterns of cosmic development, that was so deeply terrifying to the consortium. Civilizations were meant to be predictable. They followed patterns. They discovered physics in a set order. They evolved socially along well-documented pathways. They matured, stabilized, and eventually, peacefully, faded into the great cosmic silence. Humanity did none of these things. They were a storm of constant, chaotic change. The core of the issue, the speaker's chimes sang out, a sound like falling ice that cut through the rising emotions, is not their technology nor their expansion. It is the vessel itself, the human mind. The UL have presented data suggesting that human consciousness operates on a quantum level that is fundamentally different from our own. It is not a stable, observable state. It is a superposition of infinite possibilities, constantly collapsing and reforming. This is the source of their creativity, their adaptability, and their danger. They do not simply exist within the universe. They actively reshape it with every thought, every story, every dream. The Lumina speak of their emotional broadcasts. These are not mere communications. They are psychic ripples that subtly alter the quantum foam in their vicinity. We have observed localized reality variances around their larger settlements, statistical anomalies that should not be possible. A hush fell over the chamber. This was the heart of the fear, the esoteric truth that had prompted the dangerous vessel designation. It was not a matter of military might, but of ontological contagion. The fear was that the sheer, untamed chaos of the human psyche could prove to be a corrupting influence on the very laws of physics, a psychic virus that could unravel the ordered tapestry of the cosmos that the consortium had so carefully curated for millions of years. The UL believed that prolonged exposure to human consciousness could destabilize the more rigidly structured minds of other species, introducing the poison of infinite possibility. To a civilization built on the comfort of the known, the predictable, and the finite, there could be no greater threat. The Cathar Imperator clacked its mandibles again, a sound of grim finality. Then the course is clear. We must enact the full protocols of the dangerous vessel designation. A quarantine must be established, a perimeter of null-space generators to isolate their system completely. We must cut them off from the rest of the galaxy before their condition can spread. We do this not out of malice, but out of a responsibility to the countless civilizations that depend on the stability we provide. It is a necessary act of cosmic hygiene. Lumina pulsed a deep, sorrowful violet. To condemn an entire species to perpetual isolation based on a theoretical threat, to imprison them in their cradle because we fear the nature of their minds. This is not preservation, it is cowardice. It is an admission that our own philosophical foundations are so fragile that they cannot withstand contact with a different way of being. Have we not, for eons, prided ourselves on our ability to understand, to integrate, to find harmony in diversity? What if this quantum flux, is not a flaw, but the next stage of evolution? What if we are seeking to quarantine the very future of consciousness itself? The speaker for the whole considered the Lumina's words. The emotional argument was compelling, but the Xylos did not deal in emotion. They dealt in logic and evidence in the cold, hard calculus of survival. And the calculus was grim. Humanity was an unknown, a powerful, and a fundamentally destabilizing force. Their art depicted heroes who defied fate. Their histories celebrated individuals who overturned empires. Their philosophies were predicated on the idea that a single, determined mind could rewrite the rules of existence. To the consortium, where the collective was everything, and the individual was but a single, predictable note in a grand, cosmic symphony, this was the ultimate heresy. It was a song of fire in a universe of ice. The protocols must be initiated, the speaker intoned, its chimes resonating with a heavy, final tone. The risk is too great to ignore. The UL will begin deployment. T of the null-space generators to the Sol system's periphery. The Cathar will provide a fleet to enforce the quarantine perimeter. The Lumina will be tasked with creating a psychic dampening field to minimize the conceptual bleed from the isolated system. This is the will of the consortium. We do this to preserve the harmony that has lasted for ages beyond counting. We act now with prudence and with regret to ensure that the great silence remains peaceful. As the delegates began to signal their formal assent, a new light suddenly bloomed in the center of the chamber. It was not the brilliant, captured light of the star above, but a soft, unassuming pinpoint of silver that expanded gracefully into a shimmering, perfectly stable gateway. The air crackled with displaced energy. Alarms, both technological and psychic, screamed through the chamber's systems. The Cathar guards raised their particle lances, their chitinous bodies tensing for battle. The lumina flared with terrified incandescence. The Ool's stoic form seemed to vibrate with a low, threatening frequency. They were being breached. Here, in the most secure location in the known galaxy, an unauthorized transit had occurred. From the silver gateway, a single figure emerged. It was bipedal, clad in a simple, dark blue garment that seemed to absorb the ambient light. It had no visible armor, no weapons, no technology of any kind apparent on its person. It was a human. It stepped onto the central platform, and the gateway behind it dissolved into nothingness as silently as it had appeared. The human stood there for a moment, its head tilted slightly as it surveyed the assembly of shocked and horrified alien dignitaries. It was not a soldier. It was not a conqueror. Its posture was relaxed, its expression calm, almost placid. It raised a hand, not in aggression, but in a gesture that the consortium's archives, after a frantic microsecond-long search, identified as a universal sign of peaceful greeting. Then it spoke, not through a translator, not through a psychic broadcast, but with its own voice, a sound that carried through the vast chamber with impossible clarity, each syllable perfectly formed in the Xylos's own complex tonal language. "Greetings," the human said, its voice a calm, measured baritone that betrayed no hint of fear or hostility. "My name is Ambassador Kalen. I apologize for the unannounced arrival. We have found that formal invitations have been difficult to acquire lately. I was told you were discussing us. I thought it might be more productive if we discussed things together." The silence that followed was absolute, a crushing weight of disbelief and dawning terror. The entity they had just designated an existential threat, a conceptual plague to be quarantined and contained, had just walked, uninvited, into the very heart of their power and had asked to talk. The universe, it seemed, had a terrifying sense of irony. The speaker for the whole was, for the first time in its long existence, momentarily paralyzed by a logical paradox. The human's arrival was impossible. The high chamber was shielded against all known forms of transit. Its location was the most closely guarded secret in the consortium. For the human to be here meant that they possessed a technology so far beyond the consortium's understanding as to be functionally magical. And yet, the being before them was displaying no overt signs of power. It was simply there. A calm biological impossibility that had just invalidated every assumption upon which the consortium had based its most momentous decision in millennia. The Cathar Imperator, recovering its composure, let out a furious series of clicks, its intent broadcast psychically. "Seize it! Now!" The guards tensed, their weapons humming with contained energy. "I would advise against that," Ambassador Kalen said, his gaze shifting to the Cathar. He had not moved, yet his voice now carried a new undertone, not of threat, but of simple, factual statement. "My presence here is delicate. A hostile act would destabilize the localized space-time manifold that I am currently using to exist in this chamber. The results would be unfortunate for all of us." He spoke the Cathar's guttural, clicking language as effortlessly as he had spoken the Xylos's tonal chimes. The guards hesitated, their multifaceted eyes flickering between the human and their Imperator. The very concept the human had just articulated, of a single, unsupported biological entity personally stabilizing a space-time manifold, was so absurdly advanced that it circled back to being terrifyingly plausible. The Lumina delegate, which had been a tight knot of panicked light, slowly began to expand, its glow shifting from violet to a soft, inquisitive blue. "You speak our languages," it emanated, its thought waves tinged with profound disbelief. "All of them, simultaneously. How?" Kalen offered a small, patient smile. "Language is simply a medium for the TR. Transmission of concepts. Once you understand the underlying concepts, the medium becomes trivial. We have been listening to your discourse for some time, not just here but across your networks, in your archives, in the silent psychic hum of your worlds. We felt it was only fair to learn how to speak to you before we engaged in a conversation." This admission sent a fresh wave of horror through the assembly. They had been observed. Not just their ships, not just their colonies, but their most private thoughts, their deepest secrets. The feeling was one of profound violation, of a sacred privacy being stripped away by an entity they had not even known was capable of listening. The Ool's seismic voice rumbled through the chamber, filled with a new and unsettling emotion, intellectual frustration. Your method of transit, it is not a wormhole. It is not a dimensional fold. The energy signature is non-existent. Explain. I am not a physicist, Kalen replied calmly, turning to the stone-like being. But the principle is simple enough. The universe is not a collection of separate points in space and time. It is a single, unified informational construct. What you call distance is merely an illusion created by our limited perception. We have simply learned to edit our position within that construct, to be where we need to be. The energy required is negligible once you understand the operating system. The casualness of his explanation was more chilling than any overt threat. He was describing the ability to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics with the same tone one might use to describe crossing a room. The Ool fell silent, a rare occurrence. It was processing an idea so revolutionary that it threatened the foundations of its entire scientific paradigm. The speaker for the whole finally regained its full composure, its crystalline chimes ringing with a sharp, clear authority that demanded attention. You have heard our deliberation. You understand the designation we have placed upon your species. You are classified as a dangerous vessel, a threat to the stability of this galactic quadrant. Your presence here, achieved through means that defy our understanding of reality, would seem to only validate our concerns. Why are you here, Ambassador Kalen? I am here, Kalen said, his gaze sweeping across the assembled aliens, his expression now serious, imbued with a profound gravity, to correct a misunderstanding. You have classified us as a danger because you have observed our chaos, our unpredictability, our potential. You are not wrong to be cautious, but you have fundamentally misunderstood the reason for our nature. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle into the silent chamber. You believe we are a plague. We are, in fact, the antibody. A ripple of confusion, a collective psychic murmur passed through the delegates. The Cathar Imperator let out a derisive snarl. An antibody? Against what? Your species is the only source of true chaos we have ever encountered. You are the disease for which you claim to be the cure. No, Kalen said, his voice firm, unwavering. There is a greater chaos, a true silence that awaits all civilizations, a fundamental endpoint that your philosophy of stability and predictability has ironically made you blind to. You have built a civilization dedicated to achieving a state of perfect, unchanging equilibrium. You seek harmony, peace, and the long, slow, quiet fading into cosmic entropy. It is a noble goal, but it is built upon a flawed premise. He gestured to the vast, star-filled void visible through the chamber's transparent dome. You see the universe as a vast, empty stage upon which life is a brief, fleeting performance. You believe the ultimate state of reality is silence and stillness. You are mistaken. The natural state of the universe is not silence. It is something else, something that is actively hostile to complex, ordered systems like yourselves, and like us. The speaker for the whole's chimes resonated with a questioning tone. What are you referring to? We have mapped the cosmos. We have studied the laws of thermodynamics. We understand the inevitable heat-death of the universe. It is the gentle, natural end. It is not an end, Kalen stated. It is a process, an active, ongoing process of simplification, a pressure, a force that seeks to break down complexity, to erase information, to return everything to a state of undifferentiated, meaningless static. It is not a passive decay. It is an active, malevolent hunger. You have not noticed it because your entire civilization is designed to avoid friction, to seek the path of least resistance. You have made yourselves small, quiet, and predictable, and so you have flown beneath its notice. You have mistaken the predator's lack of interest for a peaceful ecosystem. He let that sink in. The idea of a malevolent, active entropy was so alien to the consortium's worldview that it was almost incomprehensible. Their philosophy was built on the idea that the universe was, at its core, neutral, a canvas upon which they could paint their masterpiece of civilization. Kalen was telling them that the canvas itself was trying to erase their painting. Humanity, Kalen continued, his voice now softer, filled with a shared ancient weariness, did not evolve in a peaceful cradle. Our world was a crucible of chaos, violent, unpredictable, constantly changing. We did not have the luxury of seeking stability. We had to adapt, to innovate, to constantly strive against the forces that sought to extinguish us. Our chaos, our emotional volatility, our relentless, illogical drive to survive and to create, these are not flaws. They are adaptations. They are the weapons we evolved to fight a war that you do not even know you are in. You observed our quantum cognitive state, he said, looking at the ool. You called it a danger. You were right. Our minds do not just observe reality, they impose a narrative upon it. We create patterns where none exist. We dream of futures and then drag them, kicking and screaming, into existence. Our consciousness is a bulwark of complexity against the encroaching tide of simplicity. We are loud and chaotic and unpredictable because that is what is required to be heard above the sound of the universe trying to fall silent. Every work of art, every piece of music, every story of a hero defying the odds, these are not mere entertainment. They are acts of rebellion. They are affirmations of meaning in a cosmos that is actively trying to become meaningless. The Lumina delegate was now glowing with a soft, empathetic light. You are saying that your entire civilization is a defense mechanism. Yes, Kalen affirmed. And we are here because the threat is growing. The pressure is increasing. We have detected its influence spreading, subtly at first, but with growing momentum. We have seen entire star systems where the fundamental constants have begun to drift, where information is being lost from the fabric of spacetime itself. It is a slow, creeping erasure, and it is heading this way. You have mistaken our recent, rapid expansion and technological eruptions as acts of aggression. They are not, they are preparations. We are reinforcing the walls of reality before the storm hits. The high chamber was now a sea of stunned silence. The narrative had been completely inverted. The agents of chaos were now the guardians of order. The existential threat was now the only hope for survival. The dangerous vessel was not carrying a plague, it was a lifeboat. The designation you have placed on us, Kalen said, his voice resonating with a final, profound plea, is in a way correct. Human life is a dangerous vessel. We are dangerous to the silence. We are dangerous to the entropy. We are dangerous to the great, creeping nothingness that wants to consume everything. We have come here not to conquer you, not to threaten you, but to ask you a question. He looked at each delegate in turn, his gaze holding them, compelling them to listen. The tide is coming. You can stand with us, the loud, chaotic, unpredictable variable that refuses to be erased, or you can remain silent, stable, and predictable and be gently, peacefully, and utterly forgotten. The choice is yours, but the silence is coming for us all. The weight of Kalen's revelation settled upon the high chamber like a shroud. The delegates, who moments ago had been on the verge of condemning an entire species to isolation, were now grappling with a paradigm shift so profound it threatened to shatter the foundations of their millennia-old worldview. The speaker for the whole remained motionless, its crystalline form processing the impossible new data. The universe was not neutral. The long, peaceful silence they had cherished was not a benign state of being, but the patient advance of a predator. Their entire philosophy of stability, of minimizing their cosmic footprint to achieve harmony, was, in this new context, a form of collective suicide. They had been hiding, not presiding. The Cathar Imperator was the first to break the silence, its mandibles clicking not with aggression, but with a deep, grating uncertainty. Lies, a convenient fiction designed to paralyze us with fear. You come here with impossible technology and a story of a great, unseen enemy. You seek to make us allies through terror, to bind us to your chaotic cause with a phantom threat. We have monitored the cosmos for eons. There is no pressure. There is no hunger. There is only the natural, immutable law of entropy. Kalen turned his calm, unwavering gaze upon the Imperator. You are looking for it in the wrong way. You scan for energy signatures, for gravitational anomalies, for the signs of fleets and armies. The enemy I speak of has no fleet. It has no army. Its weapon is the subtle degradation of reality itself. It is the rounding error that become. Is a law, it is the forgotten memory that was once a truth. Tell me, Imperator, have your archivists not noted the increasing rate of data corruption in your oldest stellar archives? Not a technological failing, but a fundamental loss of informational integrity. The patterns are simply fading. The Imperator froze. It was a classified secret, a growing concern within the Cathar High Command. Ancient records stored in crystals that should have been stable for billions of years were showing signs of spontaneous, patternless decay. They had attributed it to a previously unknown form of quantum tunneling, a problem for future engineers to solve. But the humans' words cast it in a new, horrifying light. It was not a glitch. It was an attack. The ool's seismic voice rumbled, devoid of its earlier certainty. Our long-range cosmological models, they have begun to fail. The predicted expansion rate of the universe is no longer matching our observations. There is a discrepancy, a drag, that our equations cannot account for. We have theorized the existence of a new, unknown form of cosmic friction. It is not friction, Kalen corrected gently. It is erosion. The very fabric of spacetime is being worn thin. The information that constitutes reality is being unwritten. Your models are failing because the universe they are attempting to model is actively dissolving. A soft, sorrowful light pulsed from the lumina. We have felt it, a growing coldness, a psychic void at the edge of known space. We believed it to be a natural boundary, the end of the great consciousness, but it is not an absence, it is a presence defined by its all-consuming nothingness. It whispers of the peace of non-existence. It is seductive. The speaker for the whole finally stirred, its chimes ringing out in a slow, mournful cadence. You claim to be the antibody. You claim to be preparing for a war we did not know existed. What are your preparations? What is the nature of this defense? Our defense, Kalen began, is existence itself. It is the act of creation. It is the proliferation of complexity and meaning. You have marveled at our chaotic technological leaps. They are not merely for tools or weapons. We have been building anchors, devices that do not consume energy but reinforce reality. They are conceptual generators that broadcast a single, powerful idea into the quantum foam. Things are meant to be. Our largest project, the one that has consumed the resources of our entire species for generations, is a network of these anchors around our home system. You perceived its construction as a prelude to aggression. It is a fortress for the mind, for reality itself. He paused, letting them absorb the scale of what he was describing. They were not building ships. They were building lighthouses in an ocean of encroaching darkness, beacons of pure, stubborn existence. It is not enough, Kalen continued, his voice heavy. Our system is but one island. The ocean is vast. We cannot fight this alone. We do not have the time to slowly convince you through demonstrations and data exchange. The erosion is accelerating. That is why I am here. We are offering you a choice. Join us. Lend your knowledge, your resources, your unique perspectives to this war. The UL can help us refine the anchors, make them more efficient. The Cathar can help us deploy them, protect them. The Lumina, you can teach us about the psychic dimensions of this threat. Help us fight it not just in the physical realm, but in the realm of consciousness itself. The Xylos, with your mastery of logic and information, can help us understand the enemy's nature, perhaps even find a way to reverse the damage. He was not asking for surrender. He was asking for an alliance against reality's own decay. The dangerous vessel was proposing to become the flagship of a fleet dedicated to preserving everything the consortium held dear. The irony was so profound it was almost beautiful. The Cathar Imperator, its certainty shattered, remained silent, its multifaceted eyes staring at the human, truly seeing it for the first time. Not as a chaotic barbarian, but as a sentinel, a warrior who had been standing a lonely vigil on a wall they hadn't even known existed. The fear in the chamber was still present, but it had changed its nature. It was no longer the fear of the unknown that was humanity, but the fear of a shared, cosmic oblivion. It was the speaker for the whole that made the decision. Its logic, now recontextualized with the new, terrifying data, pointed to only one possible course of action. The risk of believing the human and being wrong was stagnation. The risk of disbelieving the human and being wrong was total, absolute annihilation. The calculus was, for once, simple. The designation is rescinded, the speaker's chimes announced, the tone resonating with historic finality. The projected words dangerous vessel above the dais flickered and vanished. Humanity is no longer considered a threat to the consortium. It is a potential partner. The word partner felt inadequate, a pale shadow of the reality they now faced. We will convene a new council, a war council. We will share our knowledge. We will listen. A wave of collective psychic relief washed through the chamber, so palpable it felt like a physical force. It was the relief of a shared burden, of no longer being alone in the dark. Kalen nodded slowly, a deep, profound respect in his eyes. Thank you, we have much work to do. But as the new reality began to settle, as the delegates started the process of reorienting their entire civilizations towards a new, unthinkable purpose, Kalen's expression shifted. A flicker of something deep and ancient passed across his face, a weariness that went beyond the current crisis. There is one more thing, he said, his voice now low, almost a whisper, yet it carried to every corner of the silent hall. Our rapid technological advancement, it was not entirely our own. We had help. This new statement sent a fresh jolt of confusion through the assembly. Help? From whom? Humanity was, as far as the consortium knew, alone in their corner of the galaxy. When we first began our journey to the stars, Kalen explained, We found something in our own system, dormant and waiting. A vessel buried beneath the ice of a distant moon. It was not a ship in the conventional sense. It was a library, a repository of knowledge left behind by a civilization that came long before us. A civilization that failed. The chamber grew colder. The sense of a shared, immediate threat was suddenly dwarfed by the shadow of a far older, far greater tragedy. They were the first to encounter the erosion, Kalen said. They fought it. They built their own anchors, their own fortresses of reality. They were brilliant, powerful, but they were alone. They lost the war, but before they were erased, they sent out these libraries, seeds of knowledge, hoping that another species might arise, one that could succeed where they had failed. The library we found contained not just science and technology, but a history, their history, and a warning. He looked up, his gaze seeming to penetrate the dome of the chamber, looking out into the infinite, stardusted blackness. The erosion, the active entropy, it is not a natural force. It is not a blind, cosmic process. We thought it was, they thought it was, but in their final, desperate days, they discovered the truth. The silence in the chamber was now absolute, a perfect, terrifying vacuum of anticipation. It has a source, Kalen whispered, and the words seemed to make the very stars outside tremble. The great erosion is not a what, it is a who. Out there in the void between galaxies there is a consciousness, ancient, vast, and utterly alien, a mind that has come to a single, terrible conclusion, that existence itself is a flaw, that life, complexity, and meaning are a cosmic mistake, and it has taken upon itself the task of correcting that mistake. It is not destroying us out of malice. It is editing us out of a sense of cosmic order. We are not fighting a force of nature. We are fighting the will of a God that has judged creation and found it wanting. The twist was more profound, more existentially terrifying than anything the consortium could have imagined. Their enemy was not a creeping, impersonal law of physics. It was a sentient, thinking being of unimaginable power and scale, a cosmic editor seeking to return the universe to a blank page. The war they were about to enter was not for survival. It was a war for the right to exist, a battle against an entity that had appointed itself the arbiter of reality. The speaker for the whole's crystalline form seemed to dim, the light within it flickering as it processed the sheer, mind-breaking scale of this final revelation. The dangerous vessel of humanity now seemed like such a small, quaint concern from a forgotten age. Humanity was not the antibody. They were simply the first soldiers to realize the true name of their enemy. Kalen stood in the center of the great chamber, no longer just an ambassador, but a harbinger of a new and terrible age. He had brought his species out of quarantine, and in doing so had quarantined the entire galaxy, drawing a battle line not between empires, but between existence and its silent, patient, and utterly implacable judge. The future was no longer a gentle fading into a peaceful twilight. It was a storm, and at its heart stood the strange, chaotic, and now terrifyingly necessary species called humanity, their hands holding the fragile flame of meaning against the coming of an infinite, silent night. The great, quiet symphony of the consortium was over. A new, discordant, and defiant song was about to begin, and its melody would be the sound of a universe fighting for its own soul. The final, lingering thought that echoed in the psychic space of the chamber was a shared one, a silent prayer and a terrified premonition. Humanity was their only hope, and that was the most frightening thing of all. The vessel was dangerous, yes, but not because of what it carried, but because of what it had chosen to sail against. The long peace was over. The real war had just begun. A profound and unsettling quiet descended upon the high chamber, a silence far deeper and more meaningful than the one that had preceded the humans' arrival. The assembled delegates, representatives of civilizations that had measured their histories in geologic time, were united in a state of collective shock. They were not merely facing a threat. They were confronting a new definition of reality, a truth so vast and so horrifying that it made all their previous conflicts, all their political maneuvering, seem like the squabbles of children in a sandbox, oblivious to the rising tide. Ambassador Kalen remained on the central dais, a solitary, calm figure at the epicenter of their shattered worldview. He had delivered his message, a burden of knowledge that had been carried by his species alone for generations, and now he waited, allowing the seeds of this terrible truth to take root in the ancient minds before him. The Lumina delegate was the first to cohere its thoughts into a communicable form, its light shifting into a pale, trembling gold. A consciousness, a being that predates our own universe, perhaps, one that has seen the birth and death of cosmoses and has grown weary of the cycle. The concept is theologically immense. It transcends the boundaries of science and enters the realm of metaphysics. "Do not know what it is," Kalen responded, his voice a low, somber anchor in the swirling sea of their thoughts. "The precursor library was damaged, its final records fragmented. They called it the editor. They believed it did not originate from our universe, but that it imposes its will upon it from an adjacent reality, a higher dimensional plane where the fundamental code of our existence is accessible. They theorized that what we perceive as the laws of physics are not laws at all, but its preferences, and it is growing impatient with the exceptions." The ool's stony form emitted a low, continuous vibration, the physical manifestation of a mind running trillions of simultaneous calculations, trying to fit this new, impossible variable into its models of the cosmos. "This editor, if it can alter the fundamental constants, it is not merely a powerful being. It is, for all practical purposes, the author of our reality. To fight it is not to fight an army. It is to fight the very ground upon which we stand, the very air we breathe. It is to wage war against causality itself." "Yes," Kalen affirmed. "That is why our methods are so unconventional. We cannot fight it with force, with energy, with matter. Those are all elements of its system, tools it can unmake with a thought. We fight it with the one thing that is not entirely of this universe, sentient consciousness. Specifically, the kind of consciousness that can hold two contradictory ideas at once, that can believe in things that are not yet real, that can impose its own illogical narratives onto the world. We fight it with hope, with art, with love, with rage. These things, these concepts, they do not compute in its ordered reality. They are like glitches in its code. Our chaos is our shield and our sword." The Cathar Imperator, a being defined by its rigid adherence to martial logic and strategic planning, was struggling to comprehend this new form of warfare. "You fight with emotions, with stories? This is madness. Wars are won with fleets, with disciplined soldiers, with superior firepower." "And what good is a fleet?" Kalen asked gently, "when the enemy can simply decide that the strong nuclear force in the star that forges your armor plating no longer applies? What good are soldiers when the electrochemical reactions that allow for thought can be declared null and void? Your entire concept of warfare is predicated on a stable reality. We are telling you that reality is the battlefield, and it is actively hostile. The precursors tried to fight a conventional war. Their fleets, their planet-killing weapons, their grand armies, they were erased. Not defeated, simply deleted from existence, their histories rewritten into oblivion. We have the ghosts of their data to prove it. The only thing that survived was their stories, their art, their final, desperate message, the things that had no physical form. This was the core of the human revelation, the true depth of their dangerous vessel status. Their power was not technological, but ontological. They were dangerous because they were the only species that had evolved to weaponize meaning itself. The speaker for the whole's chimes began to resonate, not with a formal declaration, but with a series of complex philosophical query. You are suggesting that the consortium must change. Not just our strategies, but our very nature. That our devotion to logic, to predictability, to the suppression of chaotic emotion has been our greatest vulnerability. That to survive, we must become more like you." It was a staggering admission, a complete inversion of the Xylos' most fundamental beliefs. For an eon, they had seen themselves as the pinnacle of evolution, their pure, crystalline logic the ultimate state of civilized consciousness. Now they were being told that this very purity was a death sentence. "Not entirely," Kalen corrected, showing a deep diplomatic sensitivity. "We do not ask you to abandon what you are. We ask you to add our strengths to your own. We possess a chaotic creativity, but we lack your discipline, your immense timescale of thought, your deep understanding of the universe's physical systems. We have been fighting blindly, a desperate, instinctual rebellion. With your help, we can turn that rebellion into a calculated strategic war. The Xylos can help us understand the logic of the editor, find the flaws in its thinking. The Ool can build the conceptual anchors on a scale we can only dream of. The Cathar can bring a warrior's discipline to this new, abstract battlefield. The Lumina can be our sentinels in the psychic realm. We are not asking you to become human. We are asking you to help humanity save everyone." The appeal was masterful, not a demand for submission, but a plea for a true, symbiotic alliance. He was not asking them to abandon their identities, but to use them in a new way, to contribute their unique evolutionary gifts to a cause that transcended them all. The tension in the chamber began to transform. The shock and horror were still there, but they were now being tempered by a nascent, unfamiliar emotion, a sense of purpose. For millions of years, the consortium had existed simply to exist, to maintain its own peaceful, static perfection. Now it had a reason to be. It had an enemy to fight. It had a universe to save. The Cathar Imperator raised its primary claw, a gesture of solemn oath. The Cathar Hive accepts this war. We will learn this new way of fighting. We will turn our warrior spirit against this great unmaking. The Lumina delegate pulsed a brilliant, resolute white. The Lumina Collective will stand as a beacon in the psychic dark. We will shield the minds of our civilizations and carry the song of existence into the void. The Ool's seismic voice rumbled its assent. The Ool will turn their hands from the shaping of worlds to the forging of reality itself. We will build your anchors. We will reinforce the foundations of what is. Finally, the speaker for the whole's chimes sang out, a clear, unwavering tone of pure logical conclusion. The Xylos Collective will dedicate its intellectual might to the deconstruction of this ultimate predator. We will analyze its thoughts. We will map its philosophy. We will find the logical contradiction that lies at the heart of any being that seeks to unmake a universe of which it is a part. We will reason it to death. The statement, so quintessentially Xylos, held a new and powerful weight. A new consortium was being born in that chamber, forged in the crucible of a shared existential terror. An alliance not of convenience, but of necessity. The human, Kalen, had come as a defendant and had become a prophet, the catalyst for the greatest transformation in galactic history. As the delegates began to transmit their momentous decisions back to their home worlds, initiating a shift in civilization that would be felt for ages to come, Kalen made a subtle gesture with his hand. A stream of silvery light, the same substance that had formed his gateway, flowed from his fingertips and coalesced in the air before the speaker for the whole. It formed a star chart, but one of a scale and detail that made the consortium's own maps look like primitive sketches. It showed not just their galaxy, but the local group, and beyond, the vast cosmic web of galactic superclusters. "This is our most recent map," Kalen said quietly. "The areas in red are where the erosion is most advanced, where reality is thinnest. The blue points are the locations of precursor libraries we have found and activated. The green points are the locations of potential new anchors we must build." The delegates gathered around the ethereal projection, their minds reeling at the scale of the conflict. It was not a war for a system or a quadrant, but for the integrity of their entire cosmic neighborhood. But as the Xylos speaker analyzed the data, its crystalline mind processing the patterns with lightning speed, it noticed an anomaly. A single faint, pulsing light at the extreme edge of the map, far beyond the borders of their own supercluster, in a region of space they had always considered to be an empty, featureless void. It was not marked as red, blue, or green. It was a S. Oft inquisitive amber. "Ambassador," the speaker chimed, its attention fixed on the anomaly. "What is this signal? It does not match the energy profile of the erosion, nor of your anchors, nor of a precursor library. It is something else, something structured, and impossibly old." Kalen's calm expression was, for the first time, touched by a hint of something else, something akin to wonder or perhaps a different kind of fear. "We do not know," he admitted. "That signal appeared only recently. It is not a natural phenomenon. It is a broadcast, a message, and it is not directed at us or at you." He zoomed the map in, focusing on the amber light until it resolved into a complex, repeating wave pattern. "We have been unable to decipher the language. It is more complex than anything even the precursors left behind. But we have been able to analyze its trajectory, its point of origin, and its intended destination." He traced a line from the amber light, a shimmering arc that crossed the unfathomable emptiness of the intergalactic void. The line did not point to their galaxy. It did not point to any galaxy in their known universe. It pointed towards the source of the great erosion. It was a message being sent directly to the editor. The final, universe-altering twist fell upon the chamber not with a bang, but with a silent, chilling realization. "We are not the only ones fighting," Kalen said, his voice filled with a dawning, terrifying awe. "This signal, it is not a plea for help. It is not a cry of despair. Our linguistic analysts believe, based on its cadence and energetic structure, that it is a challenge, a declaration of war." They were not alone. Out there in the vast, unexplored darkness, another civilization, another form of life, had also discovered the nature of their reality and had also chosen to fight back. They were not just a lonely island of rebellion. They were part of a larger, unseen, and completely unknown resistance. The war was older, bigger, and more complex than they had ever dreamed. A new, profound silence filled the chamber as the delegates stared at the single, pulsing amber light. It was a symbol of hope, a sign that they were not alone in their struggle. But it was also a symbol of a fearsome new uncertainty. Who were these others? What were their methods? What were their goals? Were they potential allies in the war against the editor, or were they something else entirely? A third player in a cosmic game whose rules they were only just beginning to understand. The story of their struggle, which they had thought was the ultimate story, was perhaps only a single chapter in a much larger, much older saga. Humanity had brought them the truth of their war, but in doing so had revealed the existence of a new, profound mystery. The future was no longer a simple binary choice between survival and oblivion. It was now a vast, unknown frontier, filled with new dangers, new hopes, and questions that would take 1,000,000 years to answer. The age of certainty was over. The age of wonder and of terror had just begun. The universe was far larger and far stranger than they had ever imagined. And for the first time in eons, the ancient civilizations of the consortium looked out at the stars not with the placid contentment of curators in a silent museum, but with the breathless anticipation of explorers standing at the edge of a new and truly infinite sea.